everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining in our webinar today. My name is Bonnie and I'm the sales manager here at US Air Filtration. At US Air Filtration, we help plant managers meet production goals by providing tailored dust collection solutions. Today, we'll be answering one of the most common questions we get. Do I need a dust collection system? And if so, we'll discuss when a baghouse or a cartridge collector is best suited for an application. And in this case, the application is involving wood dust. We'll be featuring Scott, our VP of Engineering, Tim, our Operations Manager, and Tara, our Equipment Project Engineer. The goal today is to go over high-level basic questions when dealing with wood processing facility. What may be possible when working with dust collectors in this industry? Challenges, solutions, and regulations, specifically NFPA regulations. You can expect each speaker to have the floor for about 10 minutes, and we'll conduct a short question and answer at the end. And if you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the chat window and we'll address them during the question and answer portion. Well, let's go ahead and start with the question, what type of dust collection system do I need, and do I even need one?
I can start with this one. I know Scott and Tim and I all ask a lot of questions when we have customers looking for dust collection, especially for wood dust. The volume of air is really important, and we typically deal with larger industrial facilities. So anything over about like 3,000 CFM. We take into account the machines you're using, how large your facility is, and we'll get into other questions that we ask too. And we really try to weigh the pros and cons, which basically is the cost versus the benefits of the type of collector that you need for your specific facility. And we'll go over some, NFPA regulations and why we need those, and why we choose the specific type of collector you need. We basically we choose between a cartridge collector or a baghouse collector, and we'll go into the pros and cons of those.
Well, let's start with the cartridge collector. Why would someone opt for a cartridge collector?
A cartridge collector is a great fit for a lot of situations. There's a lower upfront cost, the smaller footprint out the gate, and maintenance time is a big consideration when you're looking at either option. When you're looking at fast change outs, less downtime, a cartridge collector might be a great fit for that situation. Changing out a cartridge filter can take, from one of the smaller units, 15, 20 minutes, whereas a baghouse may take, half a day. So that's a consideration to make when you're looking at a cartridge collector, and one of the other benefits is we personally here in Tyler, Texas, we have a lot of these in stock. So if your facility is needing something quickly, we can get these out within, a couple weeks. Some of the downsides to a cartridge collector, though, are, there's more frequent filter change outs, especially with wood dust. There's a consideration to make that you might have to change these filters more frequently than you would with a bag and cage. They are specific to the type of application with wood. You would really only want to use this in a fine application. So, sanding, stuff with really fine dust. Any type of larger dust particles are going to bind those filters. You're going to run into problems, and you're going to end up spending more time pulling filters out and cleaning and doing stuff that you necessarily wouldn't need to in a baghouse. You really got to consider those, how much dust you're putting into the system. With a cartridge collector, we're going to oversize it to help keep as much of the compacting down as possible. And once you hit about 10,000 CFM, you run into, now is the cost versus benefit. The baghouse might be a better fit.
If you have the room.
Right.
Yeah. What are some of the cons?
Of the cartridge collector or the baghouse?
Well, the cartridge collector obviously has cons. They're going to, like Tim just mentioned, you're going to change out the filters way more often. It's probably really more geared for sanding dust than, heavy chips or wood particles that might bind up into the pleats of the cartridge filters.
Will a baghouse be more suitable for that type of application then?
Yeah, especially in the larger volumes. Most manufacturing, and we'll get into this, but have to follow all the NFPA, maybe even in your smaller shop as well, depending on your insurance company or your local fire code, stuff like that. You can always call us and discuss all that with us. Like I said, or like Tim said, 10,000 CFM is about the cost-effective time to go to a Baghouse over Cartridge, but just expect to replace your cartridge filters more than you would a Baghouse smooth surface filter, because you could get, multiple years out of the life of a Baghouse over, could be months over cartridge filters. So that's the way I feel about cartridge
Yeah, so
filters.
let's check out that Baghouse then, what the pros and cons is on those aside from the application.
Sure.
What else? What else do we have? Why else somebody would opt for a Baghouse?
Yeah, the Baghouse is a great option, especially for wood dust when you have multiple different types of systems. So you're not just sanding, you also have saws, planers, you have different applications all going to one Baghouse. So you have a larger facility and you have different employees doing different things at all times throughout the day. You need to collect all that dust, and it's much more convenient to do it into one big Baghouse than it would be to have a ton of different small dust collectors. So a Baghouse works well with both the light dust and the larger particles. We can customize these Baghouses to be any size and shape we need to fit the application. We can make them, slightly longer, slightly taller, and get all these into the space that works for you. They're capable of handling much higher inlet loading, so you can put a lot more dust into them compared to a cartridge collector. So that air to cloth ratio can go significantly higher than you would with a cartridge collector. The filter life is the other consideration here. We've seen people, I think Scott mentioned that we've seen people go a year, maybe longer, before needing to change out bags and cages. So these systems can go up pretty high when it comes to the volume that it can take on that CFM for the entire system, entire facility. We can jump these up 20,000, 30,000 up from there. So a Baghouse can really handle significantly more. When we talk about the downside to a Baghouse, those cons, that the footprint's larger. These are significantly larger systems. They're taller. They're considerably bigger when it comes to how many filters and how big those filters are. A cartridge collector is a 26-inch filter, where a bag and cage can be 10 feet, 12 feet.
14 feet even, huh?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It could be 30 foot tall. Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
Back to your higher volume and CFM. I know Scott had brought this up earlier the other day, but about a higher air to cloth ratio, and that's why they're way more efficient. They can last longer. So the bags.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you could go 6.5 to 1 on your air to cloth ratios for a Baghouse, where cartridge collector conservative, you need to be down around 2, maybe even less in some situations. So.
Right.
And
right. The other side with a Baghouse is the upfront cost is higher.
Mm.
When you talk about the difference between a Baghouse and a cartridge collector, you look at the cost of maintenance and the filter cost. The cost of a cartridge filter may only be, somewhere in the $130, $140 range, depending on the filter. But the cost of a bag and cage, a bag filter, a polyester filter, somewhere in the $14 to $16 range. So that, price per filter is a consideration, but that initial cost of a Baghouse is considerably more.
But 5 times more bags.
Right.
At least. Yeah. So.
At the same CFM.
But at the same CFM, correct.
Okay.
Much less square foot. Like a cartridge filter has 120 square foot per element, where a bag might have just under 16 square feet. So you're going to need a lot more to get the air to cloth ratio you want to be running at.
Let's elaborate on the maintenance differences, I guess. Why don't we, as far as maintenance goes, tell me what the differences are between the two. I think it's on. You mentioned something about that.
There's in the previous slide, but Tim kind of mentioned it, talking about how if it takes up a bigger footprint. It could take a day and a half to change out the bags, depending on how many you have. You said we have like up to 14-foot bags, maybe even more, and that is just very labor intensive. But another con that I thought about too with the higher volume is the noise, and putting silencers on these are pretty necessary. I think that's something people kind of forget about, how loud they are, especially maybe at 30,000 CFM. Even 10,000 is pretty loud, even though we can put them inside of, they're pretty compact, so we can put them inside, but it's still quite loud.
Yeah, it depends on whether you're in a residential area or a, industrial type setting where you don't have neighbors. But typically they would go outside because of the NFPA regulations. That's the easiest way to install them.
Okay. And as far as the maintenance goes, so we can only need more bags too for the baghouses versus cartridges. So the cost to maintain them is also a little bit. Is it going to be significantly more to maintain a cartridge collector then?
I think the consideration when you're talking about how the cost of a filter individually, you may not see a giant difference. The cost between 18 filters and then a baghouse of the same size volume, the cost of the filters may wash out, may be pretty close to the same. The downside here is that those filters in the baghouse may last you a year and a half. Whereas if you're using a cartridge collector, you may have to do this every few months.
Few months?
Yeah, it really depends on the application, how much dust you're throwing in there, what type of dust. So it's hard to put a lifetime on a cartridge filter, especially in a wood application, because there's just no knowing how they're going to react when you put how much dust in there.
Right.
How many hours are you working through the day?
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, do you run 24 hours a day, 5 days a week? Do you want to run one shift? That plays a lot into how long your filters last.
Exactly. I think the other thing too, that when you're considering a cartridge over a baghouse, one of the things I look at is how filters get to you. Like a cartridge filter is a rigid object. It's a 26-inch, 15-inch wide box. And so if you have to order 18 of those, that's a pallet. If you're ordering 300 bags, it's still only one pallet, but you're getting considerably more in less space. So that cost of the freight is less when you break it down per filter.
I see. And so how do you choose the proper unit? What are the do's and don'ts?
I think it all depends on the size of your facility. How many things you're trying to ventilate. You call us and you can walk us through, how many sanders you have or planers, and we can start totaling up volumes for you and try to pick a unit for you. And of course budget. That's plays a part with all customers. So we can do the pros and cons with you one-on-one on the phone. So.
And we know they're not cheap, and sometimes we don't have all the funds at the moment, but you have to think of the maintenance nightmares you may see in the future. Just trying to use what you can at the moment, because it just snowballs into a bigger mess in the end.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really looking at what your need is at the moment too. Like if you're just somebody who has a hobby and you're working out of your shop in the back acre of your house, maybe this isn't a system that's set up for you. They have larger shop vacs you can get a hold of that are probably do the job. But once you hit, you start looking at over, 2000 CFM, that's when we start looking at what system would really fit best. Under 2000 CFM, these systems are relatively large to take up space. They're loud. There's other requirements when it comes.
Sense.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think, I'm not 100% sure, in some places, the NFPA might drop off if you get a low enough volume. I'm not really sure, depending on your location. And
right.
Probably, so we can talk about the NFPA stuff here a little bit.
Yeah, tell us about that. I mean, how about those regulations? Tell us more specific about the regulations when it comes to wood dust application.
So NFPA covers pretty much every type of explosive or fire provoking dust. So there's all kinds of requirements that are made both federally, state, city, it goes all the way down to your local code. So you want to be careful to make sure that you're compliant with whatever's necessary in your area. What we see most commonly, especially with wood dust, is no return valve, explosion venting, spark and sprinkler suppression. You can do a chemical suppression. You have to make sure that your airlocks or drums are NFPA rated. So in case something does happen, you're not damaging or sending this back into your facility. We've seen spark traps, and there's all the requirements that are necessary need to be kind of considered pre-planned. But the last thing you want to do is install something and then have somebody come by and complain, and now you've got people coming back and saying, hey, you need to shut down until you make all these fixes, and now you're spending twice as much time and money to put these things in after the fact.
Mm-hmm. And if the unit's outside, you may or may not have to get some type of air permit. Then your local agencies are going to get involved, and this all might come out anyway, depending on the size of your shop or plant. So it's just call and talk to us about it, and we can try to push you in the right direction and what you need to look out for.
Yeah, we never want to put somebody in a position where they're calling us later in a panic. So if we can have these conversations ahead of time, and we gather as much information as we can, and we share it with you guys, just so that if there's any question later, we know the path to take.
Right, exactly. I mean, we're going to tell you need to be NFPA just because we want to be compliant as well. So, and then it's going to be your decision to if you want to go that way or not, depending on your shop, plant. You can talk to your local environmental people, stuff like that, and just see where you want to go.
Yeah, and if everything goes right, you'll never even know this stuff is there because it won't activate.
Yes.
So that's always our goal too, is to make sure you never have to actually use any of this equipment. It's just there as a safety precaution.
Right. Yeah.
And we're going to have another webinar, right?
Yes. We'll have a full discussion about NFPA, not just for wood, but all types of applications and the different types of equipment. And we'll have somebody from one of our partner companies join us on that one.
Yes, that'll be a good one. Yeah.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit. Can you think of a customer of yours that called in and wanted to set up a dust collection system? Is there that run by the whole process from start to finish, how it's all started? I mean, that'd be interesting to know how it pans out.
Yeah, I worked with a customer not too long ago that they started out as kind of a hobby. They had a small shop. It was still in an industrial area. They were doing pretty well. They're making custom frames. Most of the equipment they had were just hand sanders and a couple of more larger equipment sanders. And they had picked up a cartridge collector used somewhere. So that was doing the job for quite a while. That was working. They were using it just on the sanders. So kind of what brought the discussion to us was he gave me a call because one of his neighbors had ended up complaining. They were doing well. They were growing. He had started it progressed from a hobby to now a small business. And now he's hiring people. So he's got people doing stuff for him. He's got guys sanding, and he's got a guy out there who's cleaning the dust collector. He's pulling the cartridges out, and now he's shaking out the cartridges and changing stuff out. Now the dust is floating through this industrial park. Now his neighbors are not excited about this. He's got people that are upset with him. Yeah. And so he's also at this point unaware that he needed any NFPA protections. And so when he gave a call, now he's looking at expanding as well. He's only using about half of his warehouse, and he's like, well, now we're doing well. We need to add in some saws. We need to add in a couple more pieces of equipment, some planers. And so he's talking to me, and we're going back and forth. And I said, if we're gonna upsize this, let's go to a baghouse. And if we're talking about a baghouse, let's talk about all the different things that we need to do to make sure that this works for your process. So we go through all the NFPA applications. We need to make sure that he's got the no return valve. He's got the rotary valve that's set up for NFPA. And we go through and we even add a sprinkler and spark detection in his duct line.
An explosion vent.
Right.
Yep.
Right. He's got an explosion vent on there, and it's all set up outdoors now. So he had this little cartridge collector indoors, and now we're moving this baghouse to the outside of his facility. And so we went through, it's got a much higher capacity. So not only did we cover the systems he currently has, but he drew up a quick floor plan of where he wants to be and what systems he was going to be adding. We added in a few saws, a large planer, a couple other pieces of equipment. So we dropped duct to all those places. Mm-hmm. And then we even dropped 2 additional ducts for equipment that he wasn't quite ready to purchase, but he knew what he was going to purchase. So we left those pulling ambient air at the other end of the facility. So they weren't tapped off. All the systems were still running perfectly, just had a couple ambient air pulls for the time being. But it was just, he moved to a Baghouse, and I don't think he's had to call me for filters quite yet. But he's been up and running for a little while.
Did he say how the cartridges work for him back when he was just small? How long he was getting out of those?
No, he didn't give me so much of a time frame, but during their use as well, they weren't running 24 hours a day.
Sure.
When he bought it, it was more of a high volume hobby.
Yeah.
So he was running
for what they're doing.
Yeah, for 3 to 4 days a week, and it was just him and his wife. He had no complaints. Once it progressed into him, his wife, and then 2 employees, that got a little bit different. Now it's 5 days a week, and they're running 2 shifts. And it turned into a much bigger problem.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, did he have a room outside? I would imagine so.
Yeah. He was lucky enough. He had enough space. He pretty much had plenty of back area that he had a big pad that was already poured where he had trucks delivering wood. So we had to make a couple pylons so trucks wouldn't run into anything. But he had plenty of room back there. So that worked out great. We did have to make considerations for the roll-up doors that he had. So we had to fit them in between the edge of the building and the roll-up door to make sure there was plenty of clearance there. But
did he have to file for a air permit or something like that?
I'm not sure. I know he took care of a lot of the paperwork as far as his local government was concerned. Mm-hmm. I know I helped him out with the NFPA regulations and making sure he was covered there. So when all was said and done, before the drawing approvals were done, he was happy camper, and he got it signed off by his local guys as well.
Well, he probably grew to the size where he had, the plant had insurance. Sometimes the insurance companies dictate, what you need to have for NFPA. So that's good. That sounds like that worked out well.
Yeah, it did. Well, that's definitely one of the reasons why I think it's important to let everyone know that when they're going through this process, we'll be here for you 100% from beginning to end. I would say.
You might ask a lot of questions, but they're worth going through and getting the answers.
Yes. Right. We're here for you.
And so I guess we'll go down to some questions and answers. I'm not sure. I think we did receive a few questions here from before. Number 1 is, what do I need to have for you to recommend a system? Anybody?
I think if we're going to recommend a system, first thing we ask is what the need is. Why do you think you need one? We'll start there, and then from there, a lot of times I'll ask, well, what systems you're running, what machines do you have? And we'll go look at those machines, what kind of requirements they have as far as dust collection. And then we'll look at how they need to be collected off of those machines. Sometimes it's a hood. Some machines have a little tap. You can actually run a hose to.
Right. Yep.
We look at the layout.
How much cleanup do you have now? I mean, is it worth buying a dust collector for?
Yeah. Do you have a guy that's primary job of 8 hours a day to walk around with a broom and a dustpan? And is that worth that guy's time? Is that what he should be doing all day? We look at the layout of your facility. Sometimes it's just a rough hand sketch somebody draws out on a piece of paper, sends me a picture of. The more information, the more information we have up front, the better. So the more we can get from you, we might sound a little annoying saying, hey, could you take a picture of this? Or, the brand or model. We'll do research on our end too to find out if the manufacturer has a recommended capture.
Okay.
Yeah, we really like having the layout too because, the fan is the main driver of the baghouse, and we need to know the static pressure and make sure we're pulling sufficiently to work effectively or efficiently.
Correct. Very good. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, someone did ask on our chat here. Someone asked, how do I know if we need all the NFPA equipment?
Yeah, that really it gets a little complicated because every city, state, and local regulation has their own set of it. The NFPA is national; it's a federal regulation. So if you're working with wood specifically, you do technically need it. But give us a call. Like let's go through what your specific situation is, and we can go from there. It's hard to give somebody a specific answer for that one without knowing the full scope of the application. So let's have a conversation about it, and we can figure it out.
Yeah, the government's involved, so I mean it does cost money, to be NFPA compliant. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
Costs
better
more money to
to
do
not
it later.
to not be one, right?
Talked about shutting down, and then you're not
Mhm.
in business for so long, etc.
correct.
And
Right.
the lead times on some of these are,
Could be long. Some
Yeah.
of the
To be down that long, this can't be cheap.
Having
Yeah.
to make the changes later is a significantly bigger process. Having to cut into your duct and put stuff in, and once stuff is already installed, it's a much bigger ordeal to undertake putting it in later.
Yeah.
hmm
Okay. Well, second question here as well. This is my first dust collection system. What does the buying process look like?
Yeah. Obviously the first step is a phone call. Let's have a conversation about it. That whole process starts, and once we get to it and we land on what the actual system would look like for your application, once normally for us it's a purchase order written to us. We deal with a lot of larger companies, even smaller ones. We'll get a purchase order, and then from there we do a drawing approval. So everybody's on the same page. We make sure that the drawings and all the components are on there for you. We make sure it's going to fit where you expect it to fit. We make sure that all the little details are dialed in at that point before we begin building the actual equipment. If it's a cartridge collector, it's that process. It can be quick. It can be, sometimes under a week. A Baghouse may take a little bit longer. It could be 2 to 3 weeks. It just depends on how many changes and, how specific and how confined in the space might be.
Right, correct. I mean, you can buy equipment from us. We offer sometimes in certain situations, we'll do turnkey. We have contractors around the country that work with us, and we can have them come in and install the dust collecting system, supply all the ductwork, all the NFPA equipment. We typically like to leave the concrete to local plant people. It's just simple to use locals for stuff like that. Maybe even electrical. It all depends on where you're located, and yeah.
Well, someone did ask. I mean, what are the lead times for these types of systems? I mean,
Well, it all depends on the size of system you need. Like Tim mentioned early on, we do stock some, 5, 7, 10,000 CFM cartridge collectors. But you start adding in the NFPA stuff, that adds a little bit of time. We can get a unit to you pretty quick if it's in that type of CFM range. But when you're in a Baghouse, it takes a little bit more time, a little bit more engineering. If it hasn't been a Baghouse that we have customly built or engineered prior, you could be looking at 10 to 12 weeks for a Baghouse system. Time you buy a fan and all the stuff we mentioned earlier. So
yeah, and I think one of the other things that we're really good about here is that we're with you throughout the entire process. Once you cut us a PO, it's not like okay, thanks, and then you don't hear from us. Unfortunately, that's when the conversations actually ramp up. That's when you get to hear from us quite a bit more, especially during that drawing process. We're making sure everything's dialed in to exactly what's needed for the site. And then even then, once the drawing is approved and we go into full production, you'll still hear from us. If any questions come up, we're still here to answer your phone calls. We're still here to make sure you have everything you need for when install's coming. As stuff starts to ship to your site, we're going to make sure we're in contact with you to make sure you're ready for. Some of these pieces of equipment can be relatively big. Some of them can take 2 to 3 flatbeds of equipment. You're going to need rigging and systems to make sure you can get it off the trucks, not just installed. So all those conversations you're going to hear from us and make sure that you're ready for. We don't put you in a spot where all of a sudden you have large pieces of equipment showing up and
showing up and on site, and you're not even ready to
nobody talked to you
to
about
unload
it.
them. Well, I guess that answers the last question. What is the process from quoting to purchasing to delivery, really? And that's good to hear.
Yeah. We don't let you have any surprises. We tell you when things are going to ship, approximately when they're going to show up at your dock, and that's just the way we operate. We don't like to keep anybody in the dark. So,
and we're here with you through installation too. Like even if we're not on site with you, you have your own contractor doing it. We're happy to get on the phone with your contractor if they run into any questions or speed bumps. You know, and all the way through once you've got it installed and you're flipping the switch and this thing's up and running, we're still here. We're here to answer any questions.
We got some good videos on our website. How to assemble a cartridge collector, for one. It's a great video for your contractor to watch prior to installing it. Items like that, and how to put filters in, how to put bags of cages in, stuff like that. We have some great.
Especially with the installing the filters. I know a lot of facilities that haven't had a dust collector or haven't had this type of dust collector in the past. Questions on how to just maintain it are things that come up quite often. So our website, like Scott said, has a ton of great videos on how to maintain it, the questions people ask a lot. And again, we have a whole parts department here as well that can help you with those questions being answered. So there's always somebody to answer the phone on our side.
Perfect. Well, I think that leads us to one more question here. I think two-parter here. It says, how do you minimize downtime during filter replacement or maintenance in your cartridge collector systems? And are there any recommended maintenance practices to maximize the lifespan of these filtration systems?
I think we try to take that into consideration when we size it. First.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about. Tell us how that.
Well, you just make sure to keep the air to cloth ratio as low as possible to make them last longer, and also having a stock filters in stock on site too.
Right.
But I'm not sure if you have anything else to add to that.
Exactly. I think Tara's right on with that. We try to pre-plan as much as we can, and then we try to encourage facilities to pre-plan. So having a maintenance plan is a top priority when you have a piece of equipment like this. Making sure you're regularly checking it. There's certain pieces of equipment you might need to check on, once a week. There's other pieces you might need to only look at once a month. But having a plan, following through with that plan is a big part of that. Right? Just like Tara said, having stock filters. Not only do we stock quite a bit of filters here at our Texas facility, but there's also plans that we have, like our Stock and Go program, where if you have a custom bag or a custom cartridge, we can actually hold those here for you as well. So if something does happen and you need them quickly, we can ship them out within the next 24 to 48 hours. So there's a lot of ways we can help minimize that. But having a plan is always step one for me. Have a plan to make sure your stuff is maintained, and have a plan for when something goes wrong.
Yeah. That's a good point, because having backup stock is always a nice thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of companies have to have,
a certain amount of stock.
But backup filters, a whole set, per their permit or something like that, or cartridges. So,
but accidents do happen, and I haven't heard of too many, but we do have a few where we need rush delivery, and it seems like Bonnie on your side, you really make it work. So,
well, our parts department make it work for sure. They will answer your call. So, but so far that's all the questions we have right now. Of course, I don't know if there are other questions that you may think of later today. Feel free to email those to us, and we'll be more than happy to answer those as well. But as of right now, that's it from us today. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, Scott, Tara, Tim. Before we sign off, I'd love to tell you different ways to reach us. You can reach us by calling us at our 1-888 number, 221-0312. You can send us an email at info@usairfiltration.com. If you currently have an existing baghouse or dust collectors on site and need some help with replacement parts and filters, please reach out to us, and we'll hook you up with a parts specialist who can assist you with your needs. You can also visit our website, check out our blog post. You've heard Mr. Scott and Tim talked about it earlier today. We have a video library full of resources regarding your Baghouse, whether you're looking to help troubleshooting your pulse valves or simply how-to videos on installing a cartridge collector or getting the right filter measurements. We're here to help. And last
Right.
but not least, check out our new e-commerce stores too, where you can browse our in-stock items. You can even enhance your e-commerce experience by creating an account where you can gain full access of our in-stock parts, even create requisition lists and more. So once again, thank you. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Bonnie.